My cousin slapped me at her engagement party because I accidentally bumped into her. Ever been blindsided by a family feud so explosive it ends in a courtroom and shreds your marriage? You won't believe what happened at my cousin's engagement party. Last month, my husband, Alex, and I attended his Aunt Clara's 60th birthday bash. It was held at a swanky country club, the kind with valet parking and crystal chandeliers. Everyone was dressed to the nines, sipping champagne, and generally having a lovely time. Alex and I were genuinely looking forward to a relaxed evening, catching up with his side of the family. After a delicious buffet dinner, the DJ cranked up the music. People started mingling on the dance floor, and the energy in the room went up a notch. Alex and I joined in, laughing and enjoying ourselves. I'm not the best dancer, but I was having fun. At one point, I spun around, and, bam, I accidentally bumped into Alex's cousin, Tiffany. My full glass of red wine went flying, drenching her brand new, cream-colored designer dress. It was a complete accident, a total wrong place, wrong time moment. Tiffany shrieked, and, naturally, my own light-colored dress was also splattered with wine. I immediately started apologizing. Oh my gosh, Tiffany, I am so sorry. It was a total accident. But Tiffany was livid. Her face was turning as red as the wine stain spreading across her dress. Alex rushed over with a stack of cloth napkins, trying to help Tiffany blot the stain. I kept apologizing, trying to assist, but she started yelling at me. Are you blind? She shrieked. How could you be so clumsy? You've ruined my dress. I repeated my apology, trying to de-escalate, but she kept going, calling me careless and inconsiderate. Finally, fueled by a bit of liquid courage, and, honestly, mounting irritation, I retorted, I'm really sorry, but I don't have eyes in the back of my head. How was I supposed to know you'd be sneaking up behind me like that? Alex gave a nervous chuckle, still dabbing at Tiffany's dress. My intention was to lighten the mood, but it backfired spectacularly. Tiffany went rigid. And then, before I could even react, she slapped me, hard, across the face. The sound echoed through the room. My cheek stung. It wasn't a playful tap, it was a full-on, deliberate slap. The room went silent. Everyone was staring. Tiffany, not finished, continued to berate me. How dare you talk back to me? You have no idea how much this dress cost. You probably couldn't even afford something like this. I was mortified. And Alex? He just stood there, speechless, while his cousin verbally, and physically, assaulted me. That's when Aunt Clara and Uncle George, Alex's aunt and uncle, intervened, trying to calm Tiffany down. Aunt Clara gently led Tiffany away, murmuring soothing words, but Tiffany was having none of it. Her voice escalated. This was my favorite dress. She practically screamed, shaking with rage. It's ruined. And you, she pointed a trembling finger at me, are going to replace it. Every single penny. Though I doubt you even have that kind of money with your job. That was the lowest blow. Tiffany had recently married a very wealthy, much older businessman, Robert. He's about 15 years older than Tiffany, and a good 10 years older than Alex and me. He comes from old money, and Tiffany has fully embraced the life of a lady of leisure. She constantly posts on social media about being a trad wife, glorifying her role as a homemaker and future mother. The irony is that Robert has so much money, she doesn't actually have to do anything. He has a staff that handles everything. It's not like she's cooking gourmet meals for him after a long day. I knew her dress was probably ridiculously expensive. I genuinely felt awful about the spill. But did that justify the slap? The humiliation? The snide remarks about my financial status? I have a successful career in software engineering. I'm not poor by any stretch of the imagination, but compared to Tiffany's lifestyle, I guess anyone would seem middle class. I tried to explain, but she kept ranting. My blood pressure was rising. She was practically in my face, her voice shrill and piercing. And then, before I could fully process it, my hand shot out. I slapped her back. It was hard. Probably harder than her slap. Her cheek turned bright red. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Can you stop screaming for 1 second so I can speak? I will replace your dress. But you've never had to earn a dime in your life, so don't you dare talk to me about money." Tiffany looked stunned, momentarily speechless. Before she could recover, Aunt Clara physically pulled me away. "Get away from her," she shouted, fussing over Tiffany. Alex, who had been silent during Tiffany's tirade, suddenly sprang to life, joining his aunt in comforting his cousin. Tiffany started sobbing dramatically, wailing about how disrespectful I was and how no one had ever slapped her before. Maybe that was the problem. Uncle George rushed to get ice, as if I'd inflicted some grievous injury. The whole scene was surreal. It was like Tiffany had been shot, not lightly slapped. Then, Alex turned on me. "You had no right to slap her," he yelled. "This is all your fault. You should have just apologized and kept your mouth shut." I tried to defend myself. We were dancing. She was behind me. It was an accident. I apologized repeatedly. What justified her slapping me in the first place? Before Alex could respond, Tiffany chimed in, "How dare you? I'm going to sue you for assault. You'll pay for this." Then, turning to Alex, she shrieked, "How can you even stand her? She has no right to speak to me like that." She stormed off to change, with Aunt Clara trailing behind her like a devoted servant. I stood there, surrounded by whispering guests. Somehow, I was the villain. That's when Alex, looking utterly defeated, said, "You need to go home." "What?" I asked, stunned. He was telling me to leave? His own wife? "You've caused enough trouble," he continued. "Tiffany needs to calm down, and she can't do that with you here. You shouldn't have slapped her back. You should have done nothing, no matter what she did. You're older, you should be more mature." Uncle George nodded in agreement. "It's better if you leave." They were kicking me out. My in-laws and my husband. I couldn't believe it. Alex had completely sided with his cousin, regardless of how unfairly I'd been treated. I grabbed my purse, ordered a ride share, and left. On the way home, I replayed the evening in my head. How had it gone so wrong? All I'd done was defend myself after being humiliated, slapped, and insulted. Was that so unforgivable? And why hadn't Alex stood up for me? I knew that for Alex, his baby cousin always came first. When I first met his family, it was at a casual brunch. Tiffany spent the entire meal grilling me about every aspect of my life, my background, my education, my career. It felt less like a conversation and more like an inquisition. It was clear she didn't think I was good enough for Alex, even though our families were from similar backgrounds, and I actually earned more than him at the time. At one point, she even said that Alex was a great catch and that I should be careful if I got serious with anyone. And Alex? He sat there silently, letting his cousin interrogate me without a word of protest. Later, I told Alex how upset I was. He apologized, claiming he hadn't realized how his cousin's behavior came across. He said she was just being protective of him. He promised he'd stand up for me next time. But over the years, that promise proved empty. He'd make a token effort at first, but then revert to his usual, passive self. However, this time was different. He had never taken his family's side after physical violence was involved. When I got home, I waited for Alex, expecting a conversation, maybe even an argument. Anything to address the disaster of the evening. But he didn't come home. Instead, I received a voicemail in the middle of the night. He said Tiffany was still distraught, and he, along with Aunt Clara and Uncle George, were staying to take care of her. As if that wasn't bad enough, he continued, saying that most of his family believed I was in the wrong. And if Tiffany decided to pursue legal action for assault and emotional distress, he would have no choice but to support her. Because family. He didn't stop there. He said I needed to offer Tiffany a sincere apology, one that would appease her enough to drop the lawsuit threat. Many people might have caved. Apologized, swallowed their pride, just to keep the peace. But I couldn't. Deep down, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Yes, spilling the wine was an accident, but I had apologized. Repeatedly. The slap? It was a reaction to being humiliated, insulted, and physically attacked. If anyone needed to apologize, it was Tiffany. She had started it. She had escalated it. Her threats of a lawsuit were ridiculous. Emotional distress? It was a power play, a way to force me to grovel. But what hurt the most wasn't Tiffany's actions, it was Alex's. He had shown his true colors. His loyalty was to his family, not to me. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He hadn't offered comfort. He'd spent the night blaming me, as if I were the sole cause of the chaos. Listening to his voicemail, I realized something painful but necessary. This wasn't just about Tiffany or his family. It was about him. About us. So, the next morning, when Alex still hadn't come home, I packed my things and left. No note, no explanation. When Alex finally returned and found me gone, he was, I imagine, surprised. My phone started ringing, his calls. I answered. He demanded to know where I was. There was no concern in his voice, only anger. He ranted about how he couldn't believe I'd left, taking all my things. Then, he proudly announced that he'd convinced Tiffany to come back to our house so I could apologize to her face to face. I couldn't help but laugh, A bitter, sarcastic laugh. I calmly told him I was at my parents' house and had no intention of returning anytime soon. I also made it clear I wouldn't apologize to Tiffany for something that wasn't my fault. However, I added, if Tiffany wanted to apologize to me for her behavior, I'd be willing to listen. That wasn't what he expected. He argued that as his wife, I couldn't just leave. He called me rude and inconsiderate, demanding I come home immediately. I told him no. I also told him that if Tiffany wanted to pursue her empty lawsuit threats, she was welcome to try. The hurtful words, accusations, are too painful to even repeat. So, now I'm at my parents' place. I've told them everything. My dad is furious with Alex, taking my side completely. My mom, however, thinks I should have stayed and communicated, that I'm the one being unreasonable. Update 1. I checked the price of the dress online and sent Tiffany the money. I hope this ends her complaints about it. I know many of you thought I shouldn't pay, but I don't want to owe her anything. I did ruin her dress, and I always intended to compensate her. It's the decent thing to do. I even compensated her for the emotional distress of the slap. As a joke. I also want to clarify a few things. First, as a woman, I know when another woman is deliberately trying to provoke me. Tiffany has always had this inexplicable need to compete with me, even though I've never seen her as competition. It's clear she's jealous of something, though I can't quite pinpoint what. I suspect it's because I've built a life and career for myself. I didn't marry rich. I've worked hard for everything I have. Perhaps this financial independence is something she resents. Tiffany, on the other hand, married into wealth and seems entirely dependent on her husband. He's controlling, too. She's complained to us before that he doesn't let her go out much or wear certain clothes. But I don't feel sorry for her. This is the life she chose. She boasts about her luxurious lifestyle, constantly reminding us how privileged she is. She brags about her vacations, her designer clothes, how she doesn't have to worry about working. So, I don't understand why she resents me or sees me as competition, when this is the life she supposedly wanted. Secondly, Tiffany's husband, Robert, wasn't at the party. He rarely attends family events. He's very level-headed, and I'm sure that if he had been there, Tiffany would never have dared to slap me. He wouldn't have allowed her to throw such a tantrum. He cares too much about his image. Finally, after reading hundreds of comments, I have to agree, Alex has always been manipulative. For years, I wore rose-colored glasses, choosing to overlook the patterns. He's always prioritized his family over me. Christmas, New Year's, we've always spent them with his family, despite my requests to alternate. He'd manipulate me, saying his family came first, that as a good daughter-in-law, I should prioritize his family. I've always felt that my needs, my family, my traditions, don't matter as much as his. I've always felt guilty for wanting something different. I also blame myself. I've allowed Alex to dictate my life. His lack of consideration, combined with his subtle manipulation, has always kept me in a place of doubt. I've always questioned myself, wondering if I was being too demanding. But everyone here on Reddit has opened my eyes. The reason my mom is somewhat on Alex's side is because she believes I shouldn't let a small issue like Tiffany's rudeness interfere with my marriage. Clearly, she doesn't understand how deep this problem runs, or how much it's affected me. She doesn't see how Alex's behavior has drained me over time. However, she does recognize that Tiffany slapping me was completely wrong. Update 2. Alex and I finally had a face-to-face conversation, in a neutral location, away from his family. Almost 2 weeks had passed since the incident. Alex started by apologizing. It surprised me. He said he was happy I'd paid Tiffany for the dress. This was what he'd been waiting for, a genuine acknowledgement of the situation. But, of course, he immediately followed up by saying that now it was my turn to apologize to his family. He explained that his mother and Tiffany had threatened to exclude him from the family unless I apologized. I stared at him, shocked. What about when she slapped me first? Is she going to apologize for that? He tried to justify her behavior, saying she was a little drunk and that seeing the wine on her dress made her aggressive. He argued that anyone would have reacted the same way, and that I should have just stayed quiet. I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure whether I was more hurt or angry. I told him that while I regretted slapping Tiffany, because I don't condone violence, I didn't regret defending myself. I wished he had supported me, but he hadn't. So, I had no choice. Maybe if he'd done the right thing, it wouldn't have come to that. But his repeated failure to defend me, his willingness to allow his cousin to treat me like garbage, made me realize something crucial. I couldn't be with someone who didn't respect me. I listed every instance where he and his family had treated me poorly, how each moment had made me feel. I told him that as my husband, If he wasn't brave enough to confront his rude cousin, then I didn't see the point in continuing our relationship. Alex argued that he loved his family and didn't like to confront them, especially his precious cousin. He said that as his wife, I should understand why it was important for him to keep the peace. I told him that being his wife didn't mean I was obligated to endure disrespect. Every time I stayed silent, I felt like I was choosing his family over myself. And I was tired of being second place in my own marriage. As if that wasn't enough, Alex informed me that his mother had uninvited me from all future family events. When I expressed surprise, Alex argued that it would be fine because I didn't like his family anyway. He said that from now on, for holidays, I was free to spend time with my family, just as I'd always wanted, while he would be with his. I laughed, incredulous at his selfishness. The audacity to ignore my feelings and try to manipulate me again. That's when I told him I'd been thinking about a decision for days, but after talking to him, everything was clear. I wanted a divorce. I was done. Alex's face fell. He looked like he couldn't believe it. He argued that I wasn't thinking clearly, that I was just speaking out of anger. Then he said, "Fine, fine. You don't have to talk about divorce. If you won't apologize to Tiffany, I'll talk to her. I'll convince her to let it go. This time. But next time, don't slap her again." I told him I didn't care about any of that anymore. "It's over. My lawyer will contact you. Now you're free to spend the rest of your life catering to your mother and your cousin, just like you've always wanted." Alex tried to argue further, but I stood up and left. I couldn't stay in a relationship where I wasn't valued, where my feelings didn't matter, and where his family always came first. Since then, Alex has been sending me voicemails, begging me not to go through with the divorce. He says I'm destroying our marriage and that he wants to spend the rest of his life with me. I've muted his messages. Update 3. My mother-in-law has been relentlessly messaging me since I met with Alex and asked for the divorce. She claims I have no right to leave her son, that I'm making him suffer out of spite. She believes I should fix things by moving back in and apologizing to Tiffany. So, today, I sent her this message: "Margaret, I've already met with a lawyer, so the divorce is happening whether you like it or not. Just a warning, I'm more than capable of exposing you and your spoiled daughter on social media. You and your daughter have done nothing but harass me throughout this marriage, and I have screenshots to prove it. So don't test me. Your son will be alone now because of you. I hope the next time he brings a woman home, you think twice before treating her like garbage." She read the message but hasn't responded. I guess she finally realized I'm not playing games. As for Tiffany, she's blocked. Update 4. With the divorce finalized a couple of months ago, and now officially away from that toxic family, I can share more. First, my ex-brother-in-law, Tiffany's husband, Robert, actually helped me. When he heard about the situation, he told Tiffany he wouldn't give her any money to sue me and that she couldn't use any of his lawyers. He also told her she should apologize to me, but she never did. However, he apologized on her behalf, sending me a Christmas basket and a handwritten card. The last thing I know about them is that they now live separately. Tiffany's violent behavior, according to Robert's card, had only appeared recently because she desperately wanted to become a mother and hadn't been able to get pregnant. They'd been trying for a year and were considering other options, but she was filled with frustration. She also apparently slapped an employee at a spa shortly after the party. This behavior had been going on for some time. That's why Robert moved into an apartment they own in the city, while Tiffany stayed at their house. I learned this last part from Alex during one of our divorce hearings. He tried to gain sympathy for Tiffany, as if her suffering somehow justified her actions. But she was unpleasant before, and many people go through problems without treating others badly. So, no, I don't feel any sympathy. The divorce is over. I no longer have to worry about them, their toxic behavior, or their lame excuses.